Hello there, Jason here to bring you another DM discussion video. In the past, we looked at the main resource building components of the game, like supplemental draw and mana acceleration. As you can see from the title, today's video will focus on mana fixing, that is, accessing and interacting with the cards in your mana zone. Mana in Duel Masters is really cool because it's a fundamental aspect of the game that has evolved into a resource that goes beyond its designated purpose. What I mean by this is that it's typical for one to view resources as the live cards a player has access to, i.e. your hand and field, but as we shall see, it's reasonable for one to make a case for why the aforementioned description can be extended to the mana zone. Before I talk about the cards that allow us to turn our cards in mana into live cards, I also want to offer a very obvious piece of advice, which is to make sure that when you play a card that takes a card out of the mana zone, you tap the card you're retrieving as part of the mana requirement of the card you're casting to get it. So let's get into it. Probably the best known cards for mana retrieval, Thrash Crawler and Flood Valve are cards that require little introduction. Easily the most versatile cards for accessing cards in your mana zone, I will often consider including water just so I can incorporate them. Thrash Crawler is a card that I feel works best in control decks because of how much mileage you can get from him during the late to super late stages of the game. One of my favorite combos is looping Thrash with Corpse Charger to have an, well, air quotes, never-ending supply of blockers. More generally, however, Thrash is great for retrieving expensive cards that needed to be charged in earlier turns, while also acting as protection for the player while he waits to use the expensive card he retrieved with Thrash Crawler the following turn. Thrash also acts as a clutch out for certain cards, especially low-cost ones. So for example, if you're staring down a Bolmedius, you can grab a Spiral Gate or Death Smoke if you had charged one earlier to easily get rid of him. Flood Valve, while less menacing, is more versatile than Thrash. It fits into more types of decks by virtue of being cheaper, meaning there are more instances where you will be immediately able to derive value from the card you retrieved with Flood Valve. Of course, the trade-off here is that Flood Valve doesn't have a body while Thrash Crawler does. When trying to make the decision on which one to include, I place great emphasis on Thrash Crawler's blocker status. For instance, a mono water deck, already heavy on the blockers, or a very aggressive deck employing water, probably has no need for Thrash Crawler, but Flood Valve could still prove useful. On the other hand, certain 3 or 4 Civ control decks may prefer the duality Thrash Crawler provides. We also have cards in the light Civ that allow you to take cards from your mana zone, but they only let you grab spells. These are Psyforce and Belix. Naturally, this is a double-edged sword since you lose access to retrieving creatures, but if you have no spells to take when these guys are summoned, you don't set yourself back in mana like you would with Thrash Crawler. Belix is the more versatile of the two, but I haven't done enough testing to know if he can replace Sarius as the de facto light blocker. However, I can at least see him working pretty well in any control-oriented strategy with light. As for Psyforce, I don't think he's a air quotes meta-worthy card since he's kinda slow and doesn't do that much for 7 mana compared to other cards. I think he's great for budget decks and limited formats, but as far as mana retrieval goes, I think he's outclassed by all the aforementioned cards in an air quotes competitive setting. The next card I'm going to talk about is actually a card I surprisingly haven't talked all that much about, Soul Swap. I guess the reason I've chosen to mostly ignore this card is that it's really broken to the point of being anti-fun in many situations, but I suppose that's also subjective. I also never owned this card as a high schooler, which was when I most actively played, so I don't have that much experience playing with it. As you can see though, very elaborate text, but the TLDR version is grab creature, chuck it in mana, summon a creature from mana that costs less than or equal to your total mana count. When I first read this, it took me a while to wrap my little walnut around the effect and the concept, but basically it lets you summon a creature without directly paying for its cost. The card is crazy efficient when you consider how swapping a creature in to mana puts you at a higher mana count than before, so you only need to, say, be sitting at 6 mana to soul swap Bombazar into the battle zone, who costs 7. In addition, if you're tapping the creature you're swapping out of mana as part of Soul Swap's requirement, because it costs 3, you gotta tap 3 mana, it basically costs 2 mana because you gain an extra untapped mana for the turn from the creature you swap into mana, like the one that goes from your battle zone into your mana. I figure you mainly use it to summon big creatures faster and for cheap, but being a shield trigger, you can use it on your opponent's turn on their creatures to swap out a big one for a small one, or even on your guys on their turn to force an interaction. Like maybe you can swap in a Coral to stop one of their attackers, or swap in Saucerhead Shark or Magmarex for a mini board clear. The card is wild. The aforementioned cards allow you to turn mana into a resource, but Soul Swap just takes that to the next level. Lastly, I'll now go over some jank options that also fit the video's theme, even though I wouldn't be quick to recommend them. Another way you can achieve Mana Zone access is through a combination of Mana Nexus and Emerald. Funnily enough, these two were released in the same set, so I wonder if the developers intended for them to interact this way. Anyway, what you do is you can use Mana Nexus to chuck in the card you want from your Mana Zone into your shields, and then you can summon an Emerald to fish it out. I feel like this is pretty bad in terms of mana efficiency and card advantage, but I feel like at some point a player will be in an anime style situation where this combo is their only out to winning. There are also a select few creatures which force you to pick up mana when they attack, like Splash Zebrafish and Sniper Mosquito. I think these cards need to be played in decks where their synergy is obvious and they can't just, ironically for Zebrafish, be splashed into any deck. I say this because you have to wait a turn before you can pull off the effect of the card you retrieve from mana. #millennial, #instant gratification. They work best in rush or aggressive mid-range decks where their effects can be used to allow players to curve into the right cards at the right time. For example, in Fire Nature Rush, Sniper Mosquito can be used to retrieve a speed attacker for a turn it is needed, or to get back Comet Missile if your opponent tries to block your attack. Once you consider there are more ways to disrupt the hand and field than to attack the Mana Zone in the TCG, savvy players will realize that the Mana Zone can become a resource outside the conventional sense by acting as a safe haven for cards you can't immediately play, or act as an extra out for certain cards in a specific situation. For many strategies, maximizing the ways you interact with your various card pools, be it your deck, hand, field, graveyard, or Mana Zone, is essential for victory. The goal of the video is to provide a good overview on the ways in which you can access the cards in your Mana Zone, and even if you already did know, I want to thank you for taking the precious time out of your day to watch the video anyway.